Welcome back, everyone, to Hearthstone Grandmasters. You're just in time for the first match of the day if you are joining us. Maybe you got a notification by subscribing to the Hearthstone Esports or Hearthstone YouTube channels to be notified whenever we go live. But enough selling out. Now it's time to jump into the action. Glory up against che0nsu, Gia, and I've harped on about Glory a whole bunch. He's got in right at the top in terms of points, but che0nsu was a pretty different story overall.
For sure. che0nsu, I think, had a very strong start at the beginning, but kind of fell off and didn't really make as many top eights that we might expect from a really strong player like him. And now he's got a lot to prove, especially since yesterday he did go down 0-1 against Flurry. And it's kind of an opportunity to equalize the field if you look at it that way, because Glory himself is 1-0.
He is indeed up to a very, very strong start. And as we were saying, when you're only playing 7 matches, each and every one can be such an absolutely huge difference. So, looking at the decks we have here, we have the double warrior Bangia, nothing too surprising there. The only real difference, again, is where that 4th deck comes in, the Face Hunter for che0nsu and the Druid for Glory. Are you still just liking the way that Face Hunter lines up against everything we're seeing from Glory?
Yes, I am. I'll just say it straight up. I'm going to stick with my guns. I think that when we looked at Face Hunter, at first glance, it probably doesn't seem like it lines up very well against something like Demon Hunter, which takes control of the early board and seems to beat all the other aggro decks because of that.
Yeah.
But it's that one particular inclusion of a secret explosive trap. Of course, it's a 2 of in the deck and often brought out by the Phase Stalker, which can really put a wrench in Demon Hunter's plans because nearly all of their minions are at 2 health and below.
This is one of the instances, Gia, which I'm always looking for, of where it feels like APAC is ahead of the curve. Because to be perfectly honest, last year, as a region, it felt like they were a little bit behind. A lot of weeks it was just copying what Hunter Ace had brought the week before, to be honest, which was a fine strategy. You're going to do well with that. He always brings good decks, but you can get that little bit more advantage on your opponent if you try and next level guess them. And I think Staz will have to see later on today also with the Face Hunter, but che0nsu right now has done exactly that, playing on the road, Demon Hunter even, and even against the likes of Druid, perhaps, you may be able to just get in the damage before they go for their crazy combos later on.
Yeah, that is a matchup we didn't get to see during our testing, but maybe today we'll see whether Explosive Trap is enough to deter the early Glowfly board. But for now, we're going up with a good old Demon Hunter mirror, and che0nsu has got the 1 drop on 1. Always a welcome sight, but Glory's got a pretty good answer with the coin upper wing.
Yeah, it was a fairly easy keep there, I think. You're generally only holding on to the digital runner when it's on the far left, so that you can just play it down on 1. And it's a pretty big disruption here, fair to say, for Glory. You can't go for the dream curve of Battle Fiend into Umberwing into Satyr Overseer, which is something I am always sad I cannot do.
I grow impatient.
Glory here, actually, I was looking at the coin Umberwing as cut and dry, but if we're thinking about his curve as a whole, if you go coin Umberwing, your turn 2 will likely be Battle Fiend Hero Power, at which point you expend both charges of your weapon, assuming that he uses the first one to deal with his Crimson Sigil Runner. So that means he wouldn't have an on-curve activated Satyr Overseer. So we see Glory here deviating instead, going Battle Mage Hero Power, Umberwing next turn. I like it a lot.
I think this is a great time to use the coin. It keeps that curve intact that I was talking about. You know, yes, it means that Skull of Gul'dan is potentially a turn away, but in these Demon Hunter mirrors, you're not worrying about that late in the game. You are thinking, I have to win the board now or I am in big, big trouble.
In terms of winning board, che0nsu's got a whole lot of answers, which strangely enough probably lines up well against what Glory wants to do, which is put a lot of threats on the board. And you normally wouldn't be too happy to see this in the Demon Hunter mirror, I'd say, especially going first with the double I-beams, but it might actually be what che0nsu needs to stabilize in the mid game.
I agree completely. I think it's exacerbated a little bit less now that I-beam costs 1 on the Outcast instead of 0. But traditionally, it felt like getting a good I-beam could be the absolute difference maker in winning or losing in a Demon Hunter mirror. And even here, double I-beam Spectral Sight, it's a lot of resources to use, but that populates the hand, clears the board, and puts che0nsu in a pretty good spot.
Really does, but with the draw of Chaos Strike, now che0nsu's got an opportunity to deviate if he wants. He could still Chaos Strike the 2-2, do the draw first, and if he needs to, I-beam away the 4-2, or he could just save the I-beams altogether, although I feel like that might be a little bit slow.
Start with the draw. Let's see where we end up after that. I think this is always being played.
Sure. Oh, with the glaive bound, that incentivizes che0nsu not to swing this turn, but he has
Exactly.
to. He just has to.
Does he have to?
I mean, I think yes, especially. I was gonna say because he can play Metamorphosis, say, on curve next turn, but then that makes his hero power not an attacking hero power, and so the glaive bound gets pushed back another turn.
Yeah, if I had to guess, he is anticipating to set up a I-Beam plus Spectral Sight on the following turn, which is likely to be very good. There's not many things that Glory can play that are, completely resistant to an I-Beam on curve there.
Indeed, and Glory here, another crossroads. He could go for the Cane on curve, and just set up a 3/5. It's actually pretty awkward at a health total that it's not one-shottable from Demon Hunter. It usually takes a combination of cards to deal with a minion with that much health. But there's this other option of going Satyr Overseer plus the Sigil Runner. He could have played the second slice to get the Outcast, but Tori says he wants to keep it because probably to give him more flexibility to activate the Overseer again on the next turn.
Yeah, I think I can respect it. Like you said, the Overseer, and also just he should have card draw covered with the Skull of Gul'dan. Second Slice can be such a versatile card to clear things off. You don't want to throw away that 1 damage.
Indeed. We're gonna see here che0nsu not drawing first, but this is the correct order to maximize his health gain.
I see.
Both players have a skull, but che0nsu's is trapped between some of the most expensive cards in his deck.
And this is kind of the downside of che0nsu's build of the deck. He is left in a situation where we saw this time and again across all the regions, especially the Americas, I believe, where Priestess of Fury is just trapping all the outcast cards, in your hand. And when you factor that in with the other unfortunately heavy draw from che0nsu, it's looking a little bit rough.
We'll have an answer for Kayn at the very least with Metamorphosis on this turn, or the Warglaves. Unfortunately, just a little bit attack short to be able to cleanly kill off the Kayn. But maybe he thinks it is worth equipping just to get that mana spent.
He could clear everything, but he takes, how much, 9 damage in the process?
So much. I'm still looking at this Metamorphosis, but the Warglaves, I can see the upside for it because it unlocks his Glaive Bound for the next turn.
The other option, I guess, outside of Metamorphosis could be Hero Power and swing with a Glaive Bound into the Kayn Sun Fury in order to get something on the board whilst also clearing.
That looks good.
Whatever che0nsu's doing here, he needs to just plan out what his next turn is going to be as well, which to me screams set up Priestess of Fury at any cost.
Indeed. Here is Glory repopulating the hand. I-Beam played for not Outcast, correct here?
Yeah, it would go up to 1 mana if it was Outcast, weirdly enough.
This board is looking like fodder for Priestess of Fury. But I do think it's reasonably likely that the 2/2s both survive. Yeah.
Not bad. Not bad at all from the Priestess of Fury. It just basically sets up for the second one to finish what the first one couldn't.
Hold on, Derek. How much damage is this? That's 3 slices and a hero power. That is 5 with the weapon. And then the...
14?
Yeah, 14. Oh my gosh. That is very close.
Very, very close indeed.
Because it's not lethal, now Glory needs to think about whether he's shipping any damage into this Priestess of Fury. He is, and saving the Twin Slices altogether. I think this works for sure.
Yeah, he's just got to pray that there's no real good answer to what he has on board, or maybe a second Priestess of Fury, because this play does, to an extent, actually disincentivize the second Priestess of Fury because of the high health that the Glaive Bound Adept puts on the board.
Here again, che0nsu just praying that this gets there, but it's very unlikely that the Glaive Bound dies. That's the only way that che0nsu would survive here. 3 slices and a hero power, or a Warglaves, why not?
We're just seeing time and time again, Gia, this heavier build of Demon Hunter with the Priestess of Fury, the Raging Fell Screamers. It's just not getting the job done. It ends up with these clunky hands. Again, small sample size. Maybe on average, you're curving out a little bit better than that. But it just feels so much less reliable than the Demon Hunter, the regular aggressive Demon Hunter, that just doesn't really have these fail states.
You know, Derek, maybe our sample size isn't that small. If we take a look at all the games in GM, all of the games that you've played with this deck, I'm sure it's been quite a few. And all the games that I've played, that's got to be at least 30. And that's the 30 to 300 rule that we use in science. And it honestly really does feel so counterintuitive to include these heavy cards when the strength of the deck in the early game is so reliant on being able to just power out all of your minions efficiently. And I get the reasoning that you want to include things like Priestess and things like Raging Fell Screamer, because oftentimes when you play the aggro version, it feels like you run out of stuff if you don't get the skull. But I feel that the overall cost of having to run the mid-range version is a little bit too high.
I'm totally with you there, Gia, but we will have to see if che0nsu is going to be winning the series. Him queuing up his Demon Hunter again at some point, now that Glory is 1-0 up, taking the win with his Demon Hunter. It means he's still got the Druid and the Rogue left. Could be a couple of weak points, however, in the rest of this series. So I think che0nsu is still in with a good shot. And we're going to see whether he can convert this slightly dreary situation into a win after this quick break. Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters, the pinnacle of competitive Hearthstone for this year. We are jumping in to the second match of Glory versus che0nsu now. A bit of a close, but in the end, one-sided victory for Glory on the Demon Hunter. But now, Gia, we're going to get to see a matchup that we haven't seen all too much of, despite how much we've been talking about it, which is the Demon Hunter versus the Druid. There's a couple of things going on in here, but what is the main reason that we feel Demon Hunter to be somewhat favored in the matchup, which I think we both do?
Yeah, I would agree that the biggest reason is that they just get on board far too quickly for Druid to respond to. And we know that Druid is running a whole lot of removal, Crystal Power, Wrath, etc. But Demon Hunter can often put more than one minion onto the board at the time. And Druid, the time it takes to not only remove but then build their own board is like an additional turn where they need to stay alive. And by that point, even if Demon Hunter has lost their board, sometimes they just get there with Burst.
That's right. It's the fact that Druid, despite being an armor gain class, really doesn't have that much armor gain at the moment. The best kind of defensive maneuvers that they have is Iron Bark on the Ysera or the exotic Mount Seller, which is a very powerful swing later on in the game. But I feel like one of the main reasons that the Demon Hunter also is favored in a kind of secret way is if you're using all your Bog Beam, Crystal Power, Wrath at the start of the game to clear off their minions, you don't have very much fodder for the late game for the exotic Mount Seller. So it definitely feels like it's going to be an uphill climb for the Druid here for Glory.
Brother.
Speaking of Druid at all, we did see that it's at a very, very low bring rate compared to before, I think sub 50%, whereas in one of the earlier weeks, nearly everybody was bringing it. But still, it's higher than I expected for this week in particular, because it seems that people are starting to agree that Druid has fallen off, but it's largely due to, I think, the Japanese players' strength and performance that the rest of APAC is still considering Druid a threat.
I think it's largely within APAC, the Japanese players have just been consistently bringing and innovating this Druid. I mean, to be fair, we should give credence to the original innovator of the Ysera build, which seemed to be Rivius. I don't know if he got the list from someone else. It was the first time I'd seen it, though, personally. It was when Rivius won the first week of Hearthstone Grandmasters Swiss. And since then, it feels like everyone else has cottoned on. Obviously, che0nsu has been nerfed since then, which is maybe a big reason why players are switching over. But it just feels like such an obvious inclusion when you see it in action.
Indeed. che0nsu here already presented with a bit of an awkward decision whether he wants to coin Satyr into Satyr, neither of them getting the immediate payoff, and risking some removal from Glory. But I do like his ultimate decision to just go for it, because you need to make them have the answers. If he just waits for another turn, probably might give Glory time to go for something like Overgrowth comfortably.
I also like Glory's decision to go for the Bog Beam there. There was actually, I was considering quite heavily the Savage Roar there, because it uses a 2 damage removal, if you want to think of it that way, instead of a 3 damage. But given that pretty much all of Demon Hunter's minions are either 2 or 4, the difference isn't really there to save a 3 damage over a 2 damage AoE. So I like saving the Savage Roar for potentially Glowfly Swarm.
Right. And you were talking about how Druid could just sometimes expend all of the removal super early, and that can make their Glowfly weaker. It's kind of sort of happening here for Glory, but he did use that Wrath for cycle and hero power, which I really like. And now the power turns for both players are beginning. Glowfly online, but Priestess on 5 available as well. Or the War
Yeah, you know what,
Waves.
G, we've been talking about the weakness of this Demon Hunter deck. Now we're going to get to see the power. This is pretty much the dream outcome here, where not only do you have Priestess on 5, you have a better play available than Priestess on 5. Arguably, he was forced into it. But still, I think that this is looking strong indeed for the Demon Hunter, because what can Druid really do against a 6-7 Priestess of Fury?
Not much, especially since they've already used a ton of their premium removal. But we can see now, Glory's drawn this Overgrowth, so if he wants to, he can get up to just a Ysera next turn. The only question is whether he wants to draw with this Rising Winds or develop a 3-2 and just kind of put something in the way for che0nsu, because it looks like Glory's going to have 2 slow turns in a row.
My thinking here for Glory is that he obviously doesn't know that there's a Priestess of Fury in hand, but he's seen the Raging Fell Screamer. He has to prepare for it on the next turn, or at least consider it in his lines. And therefore, I feel like the best play may be to go for Overgrowth this turn, Ysera the turn after, and save your Rising Winds to draw off of the Ysera on the following turn. because he's going to need to get some incredibly fortunate outcomes off of the dragons if he wants to stand a chance. He can still do this, obviously, with the second copy of Rising Winds, and arguably this line sets him up for it best of all, because it draws a second card, therefore increasing his chance of getting dragons.
And if that second card is Innervate, that means he has exactly enough mana to go double Innervate with the Ysera to immediately draw. And that sounds very good, but in the meantime, che0nsu is piling on the damage. And Glory's gotta find a way to stabilize. Fog Beam is helpful.
Draw. Yep. That's exactly what he's going for. He needs a miracle dragon here in order to pull him out of this. I'm thinking evasive Draconid, maybe just a Deathwing on the board to try and stand up against this ridiculous onslaught.
I'm thinking he needs Ironbark because as far as I can see, he's just dead next turn if he doesn't kill this Priestess of Fury. I mean, almost 100% of the time because che0nsu just goes Warglaves plus Chaos Strike. Wait, that is 100% because he can just keep attacking.
Just kill the Ysera.
Correct, and that is a quick win for the Demon Hunter.
I think Glory gave it absolutely the best chance he could. It was good recognition from him that developing onto the board against a Priestess of Fury just does not get the job done. 3 2-3s is game over. It clears them all up, and then you're left with no answer. So he went for the slim chance that he would be able to high roll a dragon and be able to pull it back, but we can clearly see it didn't work out. And the two Demon Hunters take their well-deserved victory.
True enough. And now I guess the meat of the game begins, because when we talk about this Conquest format where 3 of the decks seem to be almost universally brought, Warrior and Demon Hunter, Warrior being almost universally banned, it seems like at some point players are saying, I guess I'm just going to let the other guy's Demon Hunter take a win. And then it's really the story of whether those last 2 decks can sneak by. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel like che0nsu might have a head up still because of this Face Hunter and how it matches up against Rogue.
It will indeed, but speaking of how decks line up against Rogue, I believe our next matchup is going to be Druid up against the Rogue. Glory once again going with his Druid, and this time I think he will have found himself a slightly better matchup. che0nsu has, if I just check quickly, a pretty standard build of the Rogue, the Secret Rogue that seems to be very, very popular at the moment, with the 2 Ambush variant. And basically what this means is that unless you can get off to a very, very aggressive start in the early game, eventually you're just going to get run over by the Druid. And given that Rogue is getting slower and slower, it doesn't feel like that's going to be a particularly easy option to go for.
I would agree. We say this over and over about the difference of just plain Galakrond Rogue and Highlander Rogue. Of course, you're having a lot more consistency and being able to get the full on invokes on Galakrond more often, but you're giving up key cards like Zephrys that allow you so much flexibility in these types of matchups to try and stave off the white boards. Opener for che0nsu. You have the option to keep Blackjack plus Secret, but I guess this is not the matchup where you want that.
Yeah, the first minion you're going to see is at a 7 mana, so I guess it's unlikely to be getting the job done, as we see another Colossus of the Moon. You got to read the room, bro. Nobody wants you here.
Sadly. And you know what I want to see from che0nsu here is the preemptive Shadow Step on this cat to make sure that he has an activator for Miscreant. I guess it doesn't look like it would be cleared off by a removal spell, but it's not 100%.
Yeah, the thinking is if they're going to Crystal Power, they would have Crystal Powered on 1, probably. There's a lot of other things they want to do on 2, like Rising Winds, or draw off the Fungal Fortunes.
Well, either way, that is yet another near useless Reborn. Imagine giving the rest of the Generous Mummy to Druid and then they just play Mount Seller on 5 or something and you just die.
I have never wanted someone to play a card quite so much as I want che0nsu to play that Generous Money. I just want to see the fireworks go off on Glory's side of the board. That would be the quickest GG ever.
It would, but I don't hate che0nsu that much. And I know he's not going to fall for your temptation, so...
I don't hate che0nsu, I just love memes.
On wings of evil.
Don't we all? Dragon choices for the second pick because Right Wing is the only one that's playable in the near future, but doesn't seem very strong at all.
che0nsu is, however, spending all his mana every turn. He's getting decent threats on the board, and he can pass the first hurdle of Druid, I think, with acceptable marks here. He can clear the Glowfly Swarm board, not especially well. He's going to have to be maybe using Eviscerates in order to get the job done, but it should be good enough here.
I disagree. I think this is pretty premium for Rogue, that he can take a value trade with a Miscreant. He can then use this Faceless Corruptor to transform one of his lackeys as well.
Yeah, true.
I think he's going to clear off at least 4 of those and still maintain board advantage.
So many options.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a very good outcome for him. Relative to how it usually goes. Like, as Rogue, when you see this, usually you can kind of just pack up. Yeah, he's realized he's always going to be leaving 1 up, no matter what.
Right.
So you can attack face with the tap.
And he'd rather just use the dagger to kill off the 2-1. Said at least 4. He's cleaned up 5 now. Got the option to also trade off the Fairy Dragon.
Yeah, and if he trades or not, there's even if a buff comes down with Power of the Wild, there's no extra value trades that can be gained because everything has either 3 or 4 attack, or it's down at 1, which gets value traded anyway. So I like the face push there.
I would agree. And now we're on to this key mana point for Glory at the 7 mark, but he doesn't have any of those payoff cards, the Bog Beams and the Ironbark, somewhere deeper in the deck, so he might not necessarily want to go for the Mount Seller already. The problem is the rest of the hand, he needs to kind of clear up space.
Right, it's 2 main lines that I see here. He can either draw off the Rising Winds and use that as his card draw, or he can try and dump the Rising Winds by playing 3 of them for minions on this turn, and then, I don't know, Crystal Power one of the the Faceless Corruptors, and then go for Overflow next turn.
I quite like the sound of that line.
Yeah, me too, actually. The board development feels very strong.
And so does Glory. I mean, we know that Rogue struggles to deal with the wide boards. It seemed that che0nsu had the answer just this once because he had such a strong early curve and the Faceless Corruptor to really pay off on that. But now Glory is saying, deal with this next wave.
But still not a horrendous response for che0nsu. He is just chugging along fairly happily here, hoping to find his Galakrond before things get too late.
Mm-hmm. We already saw him hovering over the Shadow Step. He might even be thinking just to get another Invoke, another Lackey in the hand, because as it stands, he just doesn't have anything proactive to do until turn 9.
Yeah, it's mostly just pretty bad discovered minions.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't hate the Shadow Step here. And you know what? It might give this kind of side benefit of telling Glory, or making Glory think that there's a Galakrond in hand, because it's very rare that you want to Shadow Step this Devoted Maniac, and maybe that just little bit of added mind for Glory could actually change the way he goes about his turns.
There's quite a few draws, however, that would change your mind, that you would rather go for the Shadow Step on. Even a Secret, for example, if he finds that Stunner, Step, Stunner, the Blackjack would be able to deal with most of an exotic Mount Seller turn.
Definitely see that. That's why we see che0nsu ultimately hold back, but it really does feel like sometimes Rogue is just relying on the top of their decks, but now top of Glory's deck is giving him a lot of good options. But is the Fungal more efficient than Overflow? If we're thinking of what he can draw that he can immediately play, I'm thinking Glowfly Swarm. Pretty much just that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Fungal Fortune is quite significantly better here. The Overflow does gain him more health, but he overdraws a card right off the top. And then after that, he has to expend a card in order to not draw another card, which means he's using one of his cheap cards for Mount Seller. He wouldn't be able to play Glowfly, like you said. The downside is, of course, he could have discarded the second exotic Mount Seller. But even if he'd just followed up with double Rising Winds for minions, that's just a little bit of extra board, and he doesn't have to lose any cards off the top of that as well.
I'm actually going to say I disagree here, Derek. I like the Overflow from Glory, because I think that most of the time, whatever he draws, even if he loses 2 cards off the top, will be really good with the Mount Seller that's already in hand.
But so would Fungal Fortunes. You're still drawing cheap spells, right?
But you draw more with the Overflow.
But he had the Rising Winds as well. He could have still gone up to 10 cards in hand if he wanted to. This way he still goes up to 10 cards, but he just overdraws 2. And he didn't have the potential massive upside of Glowfly Sword.
All right.
Either way, at the end of all of
gearing
that,
up for a response there, but che0nsu didn't have one of his own.
yeah, we can argue back and forth about what we think the best play was, but it turns out both of them were very likely to be winning lines because che0nsu just says, you know what, these Discovers aren't doing anything. Galakrond, even if he finds it, would not have been enough in order to win back the board. So he just throws it down. It's very indicative of the matchup, Gia. There's just so little the Rogue can do without an incredibly powerful start.
Indeed. It seems that the Galakrond version versus the Highlander, we always keep bringing it up, but maybe it's particularly against Druid that you feel that the Highlander has its merits. And maybe it's because people thought that Druid would be fallen down in popularity because of how last week's performances went and just the general downward trend of Druid that they're like, all right, we can bring the more consistent Rogue back now. But again, Rogue is struggling. But che0nsu, he's got potentially a mirror if he wants it, or a favorable.
Yeah, that would be good news, as I think it is going to be the Rogue mirror coming up left. So for any Valera fans out there, Rogue is going to win this game, but unfortunately it's also going to lose, because it has to go one way or the other this time. The two lists, I think, are pretty much verging on identical, even in terms of the choice of secrets for both of these players. They are both single bamboozle and dirty tricks, and double ambush gamers. The real difference comes in that there is one devoted maniac, one faceless corruptor for Glory. For che0nsu, as Glory has substituted in the.
I always do.
Well, he substituted in something else.
Yeah, che0nsu is running a little bit less of the consistency in order to run double eviscerates, where Glory has cut those all together. Right, both players with the Tog in the opener, definitely a very relevant card in this matchup. But I'm looking at this backstab coin Edwin.
Definitely liking the look of it. Doesn't look like he's going to get a target right away, but this is the way that Edwin often plays in the matchup. You're not developing quite so aggressively anymore, and with the Shadow Step as well now, backstab may not even be needed.
Right, I mean, this kind of just is a situation where you actually wish your opponent played Pharaoh Cat on one.
Oh yeah.
Not very often. But oh my gosh, that draw for che0nsu.
Yep.
Glory is gotta be thanking his lucky stars that he's got this Blackjack Stunner available to deal with the big boy. che0nsu, I think, now has full confirmation as to what the secret is, because he's played a spell and a minion, and it didn't go off.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate that che0nsu wasn't able to activate it, because now the Blackjack Stunner is still active. I do like the use of Shadow Step there. Even if you're expecting a Blackjack Stunner from your opponent, it still gets a good use on the Pharaoh Cat. You're building up the value in your hand, and he should still be in a very good position.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, this is the strength of just the synergy of Rogue cards with Edwin. You're spending a lot to buff up the Edwin, but everything you spend on when it's on these Battlecry minions, and the deck is almost entirely Battlecry minions, then you kind of get your card value back. So Glory can taunt up his Stunner and make it so that it needs to be attacked and then evolved into a 4-cost. But I quite like saving the Lackey later on for some more value, I think, because already the Blackjack looks like it might merit an attack.
Knows it's Bamboozle 100%, so proccing it now, and he gets a very, very nice outcome. You know, he could have almost certainly cleared it off with the Eviscerate anyway, but now doesn't even have to bother with that.
Although, I feel like this is actually a bad outcome for che0nsu, because he was gearing up for his turn to be this Shotbot plus Eviscerate. Now, yes, he gets to save the Eviscerate, but it might not have time to come down later, and he's just taken 5 damage in the process.
Well, it's never a bad outcome then, because he could have just played the Eviscerate if he thought that was better. He had the option either way, and he deemed it better to go for the dagger. I mean, like you say, you could argue that it was better to go for the Eviscerate to save the health total, but I think, given how strong his mid-game is, he's unlikely to fall far behind enough where the lack of health matters.
That's fair. And Glory is holding back on all of his lackeys here. And I think the thinking is that one goes paired with the Faceless and the other goes paired with the Tog. So he doesn't have any to spare to potentially just die to a dagger.
Yeah, you could argue that he could have gone Blackjack Stunner plus Faceless Corruptor on turn 5 here, and then he would have, wow, he would have been able to play out the Lackey the previous turn, but I see your point fully, that it didn't affect that much.
Can you imagine the Solarian Prime off of Galakron? Just
I absolutely
mana.
can imagine, Chia.
Well, speaking of Galakron, che0nsu's got the option to draw his right now if he wants to, but that's a lot of damage coming back the other way, so he's going to take a slower turn of response, maybe follow up with a Wrapped Golem on turn 7. It's a great Lackey outcome to fill out the turn.
I like this for 2 reasons. First of all, you're setting up for Togwaggle, and if you have the option to, you always want to draw your Galakron to 0 rather than draw it off the Krongs. And secondly, it was just too much damage, like you said.
2-drops quality today have been pretty good. That's a Galakron for Glory. Not fully invoked, and honestly in this matchup, if you have the time to fully invoke it, you always do. And he's still got good plays leading up to Galakron, so I like that he's holding off and starting off with the wand first.
No slowing down for che0nsu either. If he doesn't get the Galakron off of his wand here, he will be guaranteed to get it off the Krongs. This is just an absolute display of the power that Rogue can truly deliver on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Can even rush his Tog to take a clean trade. Very nice for che0nsu. And now we're going to see the Battle of the Wands. Whew.
Wow.
Next few turns are going to be spicy. These are premium
Wow,
wand
that was an
outcomes.
insane one.
Yeah. He saved a total of 16 mana.
Oh my god. That is a completely ridiculous outcome, and does put, quite clearly, Glory in a fantastic position, especially with the Kronks and the Galakron to follow up. The one saving grace, I guess, for che0nsu is that his opponent doesn't have a fully invoked Galakron quite yet, and therefore he's got a little bit of breathing room to try and swing things back here with his own Wondrous Wand.
Indeed. Question here is whether it's Scheme or Backstab. Does the Scheme ever help him out here? Like, if he can go something like Kronks into Scheme,
Yeah.
and you've just already got Galakron active by that point, your deck is very thin because you've drawn a lot from Galakron. That could just be turn after turn of Kronks, which, if it's not lethal, then it's just consecutive board clears.
I think this is very smart by Glory. You need to be wary of tempo, but just look how far ahead he is on board already. Backstab is not doing that much here for him.
Indeed. Oh, okay, that's a good one. But 2 mediocre results. Bamboozle
Yeah,
can be
it's
paired
definitely-
with Anar if you want.
Should be good enough to keep him alive, though, for the moment. The real downside there is still no Galakron, however, for che0nsu. It's looking like he's going to have to spend a full turn on just playing Kronks as a 6/6 to be able to wrestle it back.
So he has the mana to go for Anar. The Seal Fate is so awkward. It's just 1 damage short with the dagger of being able to clear the Shield of Galakron. So he's starting off with the Pharaoh Cat, evaluating from there, but I think we're just going to see a bunch of secrets played. Or Secret Edwin. I don't hate that. He can also just step his cat, make a bigger Edwin, say, deal with this one.
I think I like holding on to the step here. You're looking to just find a Blackjack Stunner as soon as possible and swing things back.
The Brotherhood shall come.
But the Edwin I definitely like. Glory is just on the cusp of doing something absolutely illegal.
I mean, this is already looking a bit illegal. The other secret drawn off the top, or another secret drawn off the top to activate the other Blackjack Stunner. Edwin is gonna meet the same fate.
So many options.
But the rest of the turn is looking kind of weak if he does that. So instead,
Yep.
it's just gonna be looking like Galakron. I don't hate this at all. It just makes his Kronks active on the next turn.
He needs to think about order, because if he goes Galakron and draws his Edwin and then flick, then he's down a card draw.
One stab, mini kill.
I think.
Yes. But maybe he wanted
Felt
to
like-
evaluate what the cards drawn were before playing the flick. I don't think it was strictly wrong.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what he could have drawn, because obviously if you draw the Edwin and play it, it still gets destroyed by flick afterwards. The only good way to destroy your Edwin is when it's in the deck, so you don't lose out on a draw.
Exactly. Gonna have to be something seriously effective here for che0nsu. Whoa!
Oh.
I was wondering what Glory's kind of upset reaction was all about, and I guess it was the missed damage, but honestly, Stormwind Champion is probably the last minion on my mind there.
I never lie.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that is wrong, but you need to focus much more on getting the turn done right. So I'm not going to hold Glory too sternly on that one.
Mm-hmm.
You got everything done, which is the important thing.
che0nsu looks like it's getting to the point that he's hoping for a Flame Ward to pull him out of this. It could be reasonably strong if he just, uses Seal Fate on the Stormwind Champion, but it's not an option.
He's going to be taking a lot of damage in the process,
See-
especially when you factor in the Kronks that can go for the entire
I think
board
he's
buff.
just dead. There's no way he survives this.
Yeah, he's looking pretty dead.
I mean, Glory could be worried about something like Flame Ward, of course. Or have there been any major secrets played?
It's
Don't let the door hit you.
quite a clever setup for che0nsu in that if he had found the Flame Ward, he could have left everything on board so that Kronks couldn't be played to buff everything out of range, but I think even then he was just dead.
Don't let the door hit you.
Although, this is a fair bit of removal from che0nsu now. I think he might have found a way to survive. So no mage secrets tells Glory, alright, if I play the Kronks for board buff, then that survives all of the secrets, because even Explosive Trap wouldn't be enough.
Yep, that's correct. Obviously afraid of Mirror Entity. Oh no, wait, there's no mage secrets. Okay, so not afraid of that. The Repentance isn't too bad because he still gets the big board buff, which is the important thing.
Uh-huh. The only things that could potentially stop damage are Noble Sacrifice and Freezing Trap, I believe.
Or Misdirection.
Correct. But he still wouldn't be presenting lethal.
Yep.
Start with the Bamboozle, get the snakes off for che0nsu.
Okay. So potentially just gearing up for a Kronks clear here instead.
I feel that's a little bit counterintuitive. I think that the majority of his board clears off the snakes anyway.
Okay, fair enough, yeah, with the poison.
Oh man, Glory's looking stressed
Got
out.
to fit it in really quick. Really quick here.
Oh! That looks like a bunch of mana floated. And to be fair, that was an extremely difficult turn, but you can see how stressed out he is. And this gives che0nsu the window to respond. Still no Galakron for him, though.
And this is just itchy. Time and time again, this is where Glory falls short. It's the same situation every time. The rope is burning, the pressure is high, and he just can't quite make his decisions quickly enough, and it all falls apart because he gets in his own head. He starts doubting himself.
And now all eyes are on che0nsu because can he make good use of this weak turn from Glory? Not seeing too many.
Oh!
Oh, the Solari!
Well, that's always just a get out of jail free card, hopefully, for Glory if things get a bit too messy
It
here.
is indeed a panic button. No secrets on the other side. I think che0nsu is free to develop. I think that he really wants to get the Kronks down, get to his Galakron as soon as possible. There's a lot of damage on the other side.
Don't let the door hit you.
So is it just gonna be, say, Seal Fate and Bamboozle again? Right, this works too. Each of these turns has about 100 decisions or more.
So much to work through here, but I think this puts che0nsu in a good position. If his opponent does not have the Kronks, his board likely won't be cleared, so he can go for his own Kronks, buff the board, go face, try and win the game. However, with the pickup now of Shadow Step for Glory, he can go Kronks, woof, sweep the board, 5 damage to everything, step it, and get an 8/8 all on the same turn.
I mean, the setup only works for che0nsu if he's already Galakron, but he's not. So, I mean, of course, having the wide board is still useful, but that is not an option now either. Redemption, I couldn't tell you what the first minion there played was.
An innocuous snake.
Why doesn't that have poison?
True.
And now, you can see the
Venom,
steam,
actually.
or just the Shadow Step. This is Glory saying that he wants to develop.
Yeah, this is the real benefit of Solarian Prime as well, is it's not a symmetrical 5 spells. They target the enemy characters wherever possible, and therefore even when Glory has a big board like this, he can play Solarian and be relatively sure that it won't delete his own board.
How does che0nsu even answer this? The only thing I'm seeing is Flick on the 8/8 that still leaves Kronks on the opposite side.
Yep. Eviscerate now with the snake is... I mean, well, it doesn't have mana.
He's
but
got
an
Seal
8 mana
Fate.
Flick.
He's got Seal Fate as an option to clear instead, so you go Seal Fate, Eviscerate, trade. That's a little mana saved, but still no immediate option to deal with Kronks.
And in the end, he is just digging for a miracle here. Pilfer is a desperate option, to say the least.
Just picks this as something to do along with the Flick.
That is the Dormant Warrior minion. It can get him a Fiery War Axe in a couple of turns, but that is not going to be getting the job done.
Kronks stays alive another day. Glory wants he could scheme this, or he could style on che0nsu. Let's see the Solarian. Come on, Glory.
He's got to do it, right? It's just good.
It is.
It's the best play he can make.
It is really good. Oh my gosh.
Whoa!
Oh my gosh.
Whoa! What?
Okay. That's game.
A secret from his deck. And he can shuffle them back in. Let's go again. I think che0nsu might be dead.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that he is dead. Or recently got feedback that I need to be more assertive, so he is 100%. I'm telling you right now.
Is a dead man. There is absolutely nothing that can bail him out of this one. The double power of creation into Flame Strike.
I am
Illegal.
speechless.
Yeah.
To think that all of this came about from one innocent, faceless lackey summoning Solarian.
Mummy needs 5.
You know what? Eat your heart out, Fino. This is some premium Solarian action that we're seeing right here.
Scam rogue list incoming.
True Solarian players don't even play Mage, they just pilfer it off of the rogue.
Me too.
You gotta feel for che0nsu here. I think that he took a lot of good lines, but this is kind of the stark difference in the matchup when one player draws their Galakron Kronks and the other doesn't.
Yep, that's exactly right. And congratulations to Glory for taking his second win of the week now. It was a bit of a silly fashion in order to take the win. And, you know, again, I am going to be very, very nitpicky of Glory now because it's not the Glory that we saw of last year where he was making these mistakes and wasn't having the results. He's right at the top now, arguably the best player in APAC. And so when he's making these mistakes with the rope, it becomes less acceptable, which is why it really saddens me to see him roping out these turns when I know he can do better than that. He had these better lines that he could have taken. but he just gets in his own head. And thankfully for his sake, he was bailed out by Solarian Prime and the Galakron to an extent. But like you said, in the overall game plan, I think his choice to get Galakron down a little bit sooner than a full invoke was difficult to make, and overall a very, very strong choice.
Yeah, ultimately won him the game there. Even without the Solarian, I can confidently say that Glory was far ahead there because he could have just stepped and played Kronks again. He could have shuffled a bunch of Kronks and just gone for 5 damage to face over and over. Maybe less flashy than Solarian, but Glory had that game on lockdown. You do bring up a very good point, though, about how he gets in his own head. And I think it's interesting to point out that in terms of making mistakes in Hearthstone, there's a lot of different ones. Like you see people, technical errors, like taking wrong trades once in a while.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've seen that from Glory. It's more of just, I think, getting either overexcited or, as you said, too much in his own head. So just polish of maybe forgetting that your opponent might have an out for lethal that you could prevent, ending the turn too soon, or taking too long to make that turn. And I can't really say this. I mean, I can't be the first to throw stones because that happens to me so often as well. It happens to everyone. But I would also really like to see that because he's way up at the top now, that he would just do his best to make sure that he deserves the title and keep improving, even though he's got the 2-0 score, he's got the top Swiss finish.
Exactly. And this is something I got a message about on Twitter of someone saying, stop being mean to these players. They're the best in the world. To which my response was, yes, that's why I'm being mean. The meaner I am to the players, the more I respect them. It's a compliment to Glory that I am holding him to such an incredibly high standard because he has proven himself now. And now he's got to prove that he can keep at it week after week. But let's take a look now at the schedule, moving on to the remainder of the matches that we have today. We're done with Division A, the happy matches in which players are fighting for promotion primarily, which Glory is looking to be in a great spot to do now, getting through to the playoffs at 2-0. Now we move on to Division B, where primarily they are trying to avoid 7th and 8th place for automatic relegation out of the Grandmasters system. And up first, it is going to be Frosty and Staz.
It is a very scary place to be, especially compared to last year where no matter what division you were, it's only the bottom placer in each that actually gets relegated. But now, not only is it 2 slots, they only have these 4 weeks left of round robin, so the stakes are higher than ever, and Frosty already took an unfortunate loss yesterday. Reverse swept on, I think it was the Rogue, up against Blitzchung. And now Staz is going to be his next opponent, and Staz bringing that Face Hunter that we unfortunately didn't get to see che0nsu bring out, I think has a good shot.
I think he does as well. I have learned my lesson, although I somehow still seem to ignore it on occasion. But when it comes to Staz, and Staz's Hunter in particular, you just let him take you on a ride, because time and time again, last season in